Our marriage, like many others, has had its ups and its downs. It took a lot of work and a whole lot of therapy to get to a place where I could forgive Anthony. It was not an easy choice in any way, but I made the decision that it was worth staying in this marriage. That was a decision I made for me, for our son, and for our family.
Welcome back. That was Huma Abedin talking about her then husband, Anthony Weiner, during his run for mayor of New York. Her new memoir, Both and A Life in Many Worlds, explains her journey, a journey that led to that press conference. And obviously, you know, I've been doing this a long time. We have this reaction when we see the wife standing alongside the husband. You know it very well. You've worked alongside Hillary Clinton, and you've drawn parallels between what she faced and what you faced. Did you write those remarks yourself?
Well, I just want to, put a little bit in context, because I think a lot of people look at my relationship with Anthony from a 2021 perspective. Yeah. And in the moment, so that was in 2013 when he was running for mayor of New York. But in 2011, when the story, first broke, we had just gotten married. I opened a chapter in the book about waking up in Buckingham Palace. We were newlyweds. I had just discovered I was pregnant. I was carrying his child. I wasn't even 12 weeks pregnant. I mean, we were living this sort of amazing life. He was my first love. He was the first man I had ever been with. And the shock when the first scandal broke was such that, I did not understand what was going on. I did not understand what he was struggling with. Right. Now, sure, all these years later, it's a different story. The reason I stood with him at that press conference, and it's a decision even today, I can't say I regret, because I not only, sort of encouraged him to run for office. Like we had had a conversation about it, and I felt like I owed it was my responsibility that I encouraged him to run. I don't believe he would have run for mayor in 2013, but we had done the work. We'd been surprised by all the conversations we had from people who thought,
he was doing well. He could have won.
Doing well, and I didn't think it precluded him from having a life where he could, be back in public service.
I guess what people try to understand, even myself, the level of loyalty, because to your point, you had an incident in 2011.
Yes.
You met, as I recall from reading, you didn't go out with him for 7 years.
That's right.
And you recognized in him, I think the word you used in writing was the shtick about him. You even debated religion, you being Muslim and his Jewish background. All of these things you got to know over time. So and the language they use in political world, it sounds like you vetted him in some, not in a negative way, in any way you would start to date someone, getting to know them.
When I met him, he was this dynamic, brilliant, smart, public servant. And I did find him captivating. And I as I detail in the book, we sort of accidentally fell in love. He was my best friend. And, that's why I write the lines in the book. When I was with him, I thought nothing bad could happen to me. He really was a protector, a provider. He was deeply loyal to people and causes he cared about. And that's what I fell in love with.
But this lack of control, this lack of discipline, it seemed, in his personal interaction with you, not with the public, his philanthropic, all of that, his work as a congressman, but the impulse control and lack of discipline in the marriage. How did you process that?
Well, it was actually the opposite. I would counter, and that's why I write. The reason it was such a hard thing to process is he was disciplined about everything. Including in our marriage. He was the one who took care of our household. I would often have conversations with girlfriends who were in marriages or in relationships, complaining about their partner, leaving their laundry around the floor. Or coming home after a long trip and the fridge was empty. That's not the experience. Anthony was disciplined about everything in our lives. He was disciplined, as I write, reading the New York Times cover to cover every day, going to the gym.
So then what was his problem?
Well, as I write, You know, I think that for at least for us, the way I discovered it is that as at the time, these social media portals were these new things introduced to the world. It gave him access to a much broader array of communications, and as people were sending him messages, I mean, I do write. You know, later a friend of mine called it pain shopping when I went through his emails, but I do write that he was getting all of these adoring messages. All these people were able to reach him, strangers. I mean, there's no reason you would remember this or even know this, but in 2010, when I was first married to Anthony Weiner, I could not walk down the street in New York City without somebody stopping him on every block saying, thank you for what you're doing and thank you for fighting for us. There was a very active healthcare debate going on at the time. And so, you know, some women have told me about having partners who live double lives. I really think with him, you know, he would say, it's like I would go onto the computer and I'd play a game and then I'd come back to reality. In the Anthony I knew, in the world we inhabited, he was disciplined about everything.
You know, in writing this, and even in this interview, you'll be judged, though, on accepting him back. You'll be judged on right now saying, but he did such great things, and he didn't have impulse control issues, but yet what the public sees. Are there cautionary tales here about love beyond the fame, beyond the politics, beyond not being able to walk down the street when it comes to this kind of betrayal? Because you talk about it wasn't just online. You eventually learned that he was having affairs, that this was physical too.
Well, I think, you know, and I want to reiterate something you just said. I mean, this really is Anthony's story to tell in terms of his own behavior and his own conduct. And I don't take responsibility for any of it, and I don't blame anybody for it. When it first happened, because it was so public, we were sort of in this bunker together. You know, I have 2 chapters in the book. One's called Shame, Shame, Go Away, and the other is Elephant in the Room. And I did walk with a lot of shame. We were alienated from segments of society. It was really hard. And for somebody like me who grew up in the Middle East, surrounded by a very supportive community, what we call in the Muslim world the ummah, there's always somebody there for you. And it was one of the reasons why working for Hillary was such a, you know, connection to my previous life, because there really was that sense of community. To feel that isolation, to feel alone was very hard. And I mean, I'm not going to own his mistakes. He made mistakes. My gosh. And did he also pay for those mistakes? But those are his. Right. What we have together is a child. And I don't know that, you know, I'm, as you said, I'm sure I'll be judged for what I did or didn't do, or I should have stayed, or I should have gone. Everyone gives me, you know, advice. You were the only person who has to go home at the end of the night. And that home right now is filled with a 9-year-old. And I want him to read this book, because as you opened this interview, I want him to read this book with great pride when he's old enough to know the history he came from. I open with the story of who my forebears were and this tremendous legacy we were raised to honor. And I want him to be proud of his mom and what she did. And I want him to say, Mom, thank you for trying to help Dad, because we did have to do the work. And it was really hard. And it's going to be ongoing. So while he won't be my husband, he will be the father of my child for the rest of our lives. And our goal is to keep our son healthy and whole and happy.
You write about your boss, Hillary Clinton, and having this surreal experience, this dream job put in front of you that you didn't even think you were going to get.
Oh, no. I thought I was going to be fired many times.
You were going to be fired. But your relationship builds, your professional relationship, personal relationship. And in the book, going back to the scandal, you thought that you were going to ruin her. And you actually write about the line. It said something to the effect of, this man, which I was struck by while you referred to him as this man, was going to not only ruin you, that he could potentially ruin Hillary Clinton's run for president. And you still deal with that now. Why is that still an open wound?
I mean, as it relates to the 2016 campaign, I'm going to carry that to my grave.
Why?
I mean, I don't, you know.
But we now know there's so many other factors.
There are so many other factors. And I feel, that scene is from 2016. That's how I felt in that moment when the investigation was reopened 10 days before, the shocking, you know, reopening of the investigation. And I felt at the time that even feeling anything was selfish. I just shut myself down and girded myself, and the goal was to get Hillary Clinton elected. We had to make it through the 10 days. Now we know that there were many factors, obviously, that cost her the election, but there is no doubt that it was a factor, and there's plenty of evidence that it was a factor, and that was very hard for me to have to deal with and live with. And I'll tell you why. It is because every day that I wake up and see something that is bad for this country or that wouldn't have happened if she was president, I think of that a lot.
In her memoir, she talked about people wanting her to fire you. You go back to relationships and bonds. Why did she remain loyal to you?
That is an excellent question to be asking Hillary Clinton, but I'm lucky.
Why do you think?
I think she's always had the ability to put herself in somebody else's shoes. It's why she is such a great caretaker. She is problem solver in chief. I talk about how when I first had to deal with this shocking news from my husband, she calls my family, and we're on an official State Department trip to Abu Dhabi, and she has my family come in from London and Saudi Arabia so they could be in my hotel room at night just so we could sit together and hold hands.
Your divorce is not finalized yet, is that the case?
We're in the final stages. I'm letting the lawyers do the lawyer thing.
What will that moment be like when, I don't know if they still sign it or you e-sign it or whatever, but when it's done, what will be the moment like for you? What will it be like for you?
I think that moment already happened for me.
Really?
We have a partnership, and we're going to be raising our son together, but it's a piece of paper for me, so I don't think, I don't really think about it, actually.
Do you think about dating? I mean, you have this part of
Do you have any suggestions, Tamron?
You were ready for that. Someone told you.
I was not ready for that. Nice. And no one has asked me that question.
Because I'm Tamron Hall. I'm going to ask.
There you go. There you go. This is why you are.
I ask it because you're 46. You are brilliant. You have closed this chapter in your life. And there's a lot of time left to enjoy it with someone else. Are you in the mindset where so that's as people go through what you've been through, you wouldn't have trust. But you have trust now because you've closed the door. Are you ready to date? Are you interested in moving forward with that part of your life after the divorce is finalized?
I think I stole this from Shonda. I'm admitting I stole this from Shonda Rhimes, okay? I had a whole epilogue about all the women who inspired me to write my book, and Shonda is like kind of high on that list. I mean, she really encouraged me to do the work and do the writing. And her book was titled, as you might remember, My Year of Saying Yes. And I'm kind of in that same space. I'm open to whatever. Now, however, people have seen me on TV for so many years, but they don't realize I've never done this.
Right.
Like, I'm always back there.
Yeah.
So I didn't intend to say I was planning to run for office. I was nervous, and I was cold, and my legs were shaking, and So no to running for office, but yes to dating. You're ready for that? I think it's yes to pretty much everything, but I don't want to run for office. I think I know I don't want to run for office.